This is the Kids Corner where kids get to ask questions if they'd like to, but I'll also talk about things that might be of interest to kids. And just a reminder, as we do every time, this is for educational purposes and is not intended to be in place of your doctor. So if you have questions, please talk to your doctor, your health team, and make sure you get those questions answered. You're also welcome to have your parents make an appointment with me for a visit on the computer with telehealth. So there's information there for that. We do have some other classes too. So take a look for those. There is a new password for these, which makes it a little trickier to get in. So mom and dad will need that password. That will be on the new flyers that are going out. If you have any other questions, please email Kira at kira.po@uhhospitals.org. And there are great resources, again, on the UH website for parenting during COVID. That's mostly for your parents. I thought today one of the things we could just talk about a little bit is, we talk about feeling stressed, we talk about feeling kind of nervous about the present and the future and what's going to happen. And one way that we think about that is we can divide up the different parts of our being, the different parts of kind of who we are. And one of the biggest ways to divide those up is just to think about your body and your mind and your emotions. And there are other ways to divide things up too. Sometimes people do a 4-part piece with spirit in there too. That's a big discussion also. But for today, we're just going to focus on body, mind, and emotions. And one of the reasons we do that is that comes from your biology, your physiology, how you're actually made up as a creature, we might say. And so there's an old theory, it's not that old, but it's a little bit of an older theory called the triune brain theory. Triune means 3, the 3-brain theory. And this was an idea that we have brains that developed over time through a process called evolution, where we developed more and more complicated ways of being and thinking as time went on. And so one of the thoughts was there's this brain stem region, which is deep in your brain and controls things like your, what we call fight or flight. So when you get really scared and you just run away, that's one thing that this part of the brain controls. So you don't have to think about it, you just kind of do it. And another part of the brain is called the limbic system, and that's your emotional brain. And that's the part of your brain that helps you feel emotions and processes emotions and thinks about those types of things and makes memory have emotional pieces to it. So when you remember something happy, like a birthday party or something, or when you used to play outside all the time and run around with the other kids, which you'll get to do again, but just not right now. That's part of the brain that makes you be able to enjoy those happy things. And it's the same part of your brain that helps sometimes make you feel scared or sad or all those important kind of feelings that we all have. And then there's something called the neocortex. Neo means new. And cortex is part of the brain. It's the surface of the brain. And this is the part of the brain we think has the most to do with more complicated ways of interacting, complicated language, ideas, thoughts, sort of big dreams and ideas about things you're going to do are part of your brain in this part of the brain. And so when we looked up before, we'll go right there. I put here, so physical, we have our bodies, our physical bodies and our instincts too. So there are some things that we just do and we don't have to think about, and we don't quite know where the feelings come from. That may be really deep in us. And that can even be there when you're born. There are certain parts of our instincts that we're just born with that all animals have different types of instincts too. And so we don't learn them, they're just kind of there. And then another part of the brain that we talked about was that emotional brain, and that's our feelings like we talked about. And then the mental brain, your thinking brain, and then that's your intellectual, your logical, and your thought kind of ideas. But I wanted to say something that I thought was really interesting to learn, and that is that we were a little bit wrong about this theory, that scientists thought this was a really good theory for a long time, and it was. You can see this picture actually is from 1960. So that goes a ways back at this point too, right? 60 years back. But what we learned, and this is just from 1996, and that's a lot of words, so don't worry about the words too much, but what this slide says is that we learned that reptiles, we used to call it our reptilian brain because we thought it was most like lizards, because we saw lizards just sitting around on rocks all day, heating themselves up because they're cold-blooded, and we thought, well, that's kind of how that part of the brain was, and they didn't do anything super complicated otherwise. And we learned that that was wrong. Like, what is that? 36 years after that theory was noted there. That theory may have come before 1960. But this is a picture of a turtle that zookeepers named Pigface, which I think they meant very affectionately. So sweet little Pigface. And he is a turtle that was living in a zoo, and he seemed to be really, really sad. And they didn't know why, but they were watching poor little pig face, and he was doing things to hurt himself. He was feeling stressed. He was feeling cooped up in the house, and he didn't have anything to do. And he was feeling just really frustrated. And I'm going to bet that some of you also know how that feels, to feel really frustrated from being cooped up in the house with nothing to do, and you just get annoyed and you start like banging on the walls or whatever maybe you do when you get annoyed. And what the zookeepers learned and tried was that it turned out Pigface was bored, and Pigface was a little bit lonely. And so they started playing games with him, and they found that he liked to play with toys. And so he had a favorite game of playing tug of war with the zookeepers over a garden hose. And he liked nosing a basketball around his little pen. And he bounced a hula hoop through the water, and liked to play with a water hose. So he'd position it so it would spray him in the face with water. And he thought that was very exciting. And when they started realizing that Pigface actually liked to play and he liked to interact, they learned a lot, because before this time, as they said, this is the first official study of play behavior in types of animals that are not birds and are not people and are not what we call mammals like people are. And so we didn't know that reptiles could play before this time. And it turns out now that we started studying that, we learned that they do. We learned that like crocodiles, for example, are very affectionate with their babies. And so even though we think of crocodiles as being kind of like scary, and maybe we think of them that way, or are just kind of boring or whatever, they actually, have a whole social kind of life that we didn't appreciate, which means that those animals have some pieces of a limbic system of that emotional brain and some pieces of a neocortex and that higher brain, even though it's not nearly as complicated as ours, as developed as ours as people. But I think it's really interesting to think about that. If we think about an evolutionary model of how we became to be who we are, we learned that the desire to be social and the desire to play and the desire to be interactive goes way, 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 way back to at least even turtles. And so we know how deep that is. And so it's important that we respect that. And then when we're home and we're feeling sad and we're feeling lonely and we're not getting to do things we want to do, and we're feeling frustrated and upset, that lots of creatures feel that way. And so we have to find ways of keeping ourselves happy and respect that that's just part of who we are. We like to be social. We like to be engaged. So what can you do to deal with these different parts of who you are, different parts of your brain and your body? So when we think about that mental part, we say again, that new cortex, neosurface, the new surface of our brain, the new part there. One of the ways we manage the parts of our stress that makes that part of our brain happy is to do things like write in journals. So if you're old enough to write stories about how you're feeling and write out, your thoughts about what's going on, and you could even create creative stories where you think about, imaginary things, or you think about different ways of thinking about what's going on right now, and you do things like that. That's one way of using that part of your brain and helping it feel satisfied that it's being heard and engaged, and help it process kind of what's going on. Talking with your friends, talking with your parents, talking with your siblings, your brothers or sisters, talking with cousins, whoever it might be. That's another way to keep that part of you happy, your mental part. You need that kind of stimulation where you share ideas and you think about new things, and you dream dreams together and you do things like that. Those are parts, or those are activities that you can do to keep that part of your mind happy. So when we think about that emotional part, the emotional part of you oftentimes responds to things that are kind of colorful, or we say abstract. So not so thinky, not so heady, not so wordy, but more, how does it feel? So like when we look at this lovely picture here someone painted, we get a sense of emotion, right? We know we feel happy. Those are nice, bright colors that make us feel good. We see hearts that express love. And so we can look at that picture and we can just kind of sit with it and just kind of feel happy with it. And you can do pictures like that too. And so your pictures don't even always have to be happy. If sometimes your pictures are a little sad, that's okay too, because they should reflect how you feel. There's no right or wrong. And it doesn't have to be perfect of a picture. You can do finger painting with just colors. You could do a picture where you make like really clear images of things if you wanted to. There's all different ways to go with artwork. Again, there's no right or wrong. So you just find different ways of expressing yourself. When we say expressing your emotions, and color and artwork and painting are all really amazing ways to do that. And that also will help make your brain happy and make you feel happy because you're doing something, you're engaging, and you're keeping active, just like our turtle friend did. And so we can also use music to make this part of ourselves happy. Music is a good way of expressing emotion. Music can also be very intellectual. It can be very thoughtful, and it can give us ideas, absolutely. So it's not like each of these is alone. They all interrelate with one another, but they're big categories, big pieces of things that all fall together under these different places. And so when we're thinking of emotional brain, limbic brain, music oftentimes really helps us express ourselves and express our emotions in a way that you just can't do in almost any other way. And so that can be good. Visualizing means seeing it in your head. So like closing your eyes, or almost closing your eyes completely. Sometimes we say softening the eyes and visualizing, picturing things. So it's sort of like daydreaming in a way, but when you're visualizing, sometimes we think it's sort of like you're daydreaming intentionally. You're doing it on purpose. You're not just letting your mind wander, but you're picturing something that you're going to use. So maybe it's a bright blue sky, maybe it's a rainy day outside and you just want to feel the sunshine. So sometimes you have to just close your eyes and practice picturing the sunshine, picturing yourself on a nice beach, or picturing yourself where you want to be, and then feeling the emotion that comes from that, and feeling really like happy if that's what you're thinking you want to feel, and letting yourself explore that a little bit. So visualizing, there's a million ways to do it. And so there's no right or wrong, but you just also have to practice. So all of these things, the more you do them, the more you practice them, the better that you'll get at them. And then dancing can be another way too. That's one way where we sort of express with our whole bodies. And dancing also is one of those things that helps your body, it helps your mind, but it also is a great way of expressing emotions. And I think that's why some people love it so much, is because it allows them to express what they're feeling in a very different way. Because emotions sometimes aren't best expressed with words, because that actually takes us to a different part of our brain. That takes us back to our neocortex, we say, when we're expressing with words. And so sometimes we have to find ways of expressing that part of our brain and our bodies without using the words. And so color, music, movement, images, things like that are great ways to help with this part of our being. And then the last piece that we'll think about today is that body part. Like, how do we make our bodies happy, right? And so there's lots of different ways to do that. So I have this picture of this young man here who's doing something called belly breathing. And so he's lying on the ground and he's feeling nice and relaxed. And so he's letting his body feel nice and heavy on the ground. So again, he's not really thinking about it so much. It's not about the emotional feeling. It's about that body feeling. That is sort of like, the lizard sitting on a rock getting nice and warm on a good sunny day. That's, you lie down and just feel that nice relaxation. You feel it in your body, and then you breathe, and then you take a nice deep breath in through your nose, and you let your belly expand out. And we do that to allow room for our lungs to fill up completely with air, because there's a muscle at the bottom of your lungs called the diaphragm, which connects to your rib cage. And when the diaphragm contracts, gets smaller, it drops down and it opens up space for air to come into your lungs. So we push our bellies out to give that diaphragm as much room as it can to let all the air into our lungs that we can. And it also signals our body at a really deep level that we're relaxed. So when you breathe in through your nose, let your belly expand, and then out through your mouth. It just takes everything down some notches, right? It makes you feel nice and calm and relaxed, and that feels good. And so you can practice that at home. So when you're feeling stressed or tensed or angry or something that you don't want to be feeling necessarily, one way of taking control of that is to just do some simple breathing. Who knew that doing some breathing would be so important? But breathing is really, really important, because when you're stressed, you breathe one way. You tend to either hold your breath, or you breathe rapid and fast from just the upper part of your lungs because you're all nervous and you're, right? That's not relaxed. So if you see someone standing there going, You know they're not relaxed, right? If they're doing this, then you know they're relaxed. And that's just a difference of breathing. And so practicing breathing exercise is a great way to control that part of your brain and your body. And it also even helps your instincts who might be feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm really worried, I'm really nervous, I want to run away. It gets them all calm too, because if you're breathing nice and easy, they say, okay, I must be relaxed because we're breathing nice and easy. So it's a little bit of a trick, but you get to be in control of it. Another great way to make your body feel happy is through stretching, doing things like yoga, where you stretch and you relax, and then you do this. And there's things called chair yoga, where you do yoga sitting in a chair. Mostly kids don't really want to do chair yoga as much unless there's some reason for them wanting to do it, like they're in the hospital or they're hurt or something like that. Adults sometimes like the chair yoga better because they're feeling a little tired, and it's good to be able to do it from the chair. But there's full body yoga too, and you can do stretching, and there's fun movements. We've talked about those before, things like downward dog or cobra or mountain pose or warrior pose or things like that, that get you really into your body and get it all stretched out. And then another thing that you can do that really helps your body feel relaxed too is if you're feeling chilly, warm it up. So taking a nice hot bath. And that's something, of course, depending on your age, you want mom or dad there to help you do, so you do it safely, right? We got to be careful around water sometimes, depending on how old we are. But taking a nice warm bath is a great way to just stay relaxed. And that really is like what we call that reptile-like behavior, where we just want to lie on a warm rock, like lying on the beach. When you see all those people lying on the beach, that's them using the sun and the warmth and the air just to lie there and feel good. That's their kind of, we say, their reptilian brain a little bit, even though we know that reptiles have some complex behaviors too. But it's that old part that's just responding to your environment. Is it warm out? Is it cold out? And then some days you're feeling too hot, and so that's not helpful. And so you get all hot, you get all agitated, and you don't feel good. And then you need to cool yourself down. So you go inside, maybe you get out of the sunshine, you get a nice, there maybe a nice breeze is going by, have a cool glass of something healthy to drink that nourishes your body and cools it down a little bit. And sometimes that can be the right thing to do too. So when you're too warm, you want to cool yourself down. When you're too cold, you may want to warm yourself up. But either way, you're giving information to your body that helps it understand if you're stressed or if you're relaxed or if you're feeling good or if you're not feeling good. And so you can combine these things together in different ways, draw creative pictures with lots of colors and a story behind it, and do your breathing in a nice, warm, comfortable place. And then you're making all three parts of your brain happy all at once. And but even just focusing on one or two, and again, there's probably 100 different ways to do things for each of these parts of you. And so you can work with mom and dad, or maybe your teachers or your friends, to think of different ways to do that. But those are the three I'll just talk about right now, is writing down stories and writing down journals. So when something's in your head that's bothering you in your head, write it into a book, get it on paper. And a lot of times that'll take it out of your head, so you don't have to worry about it so much. And then even write down, the way you would like to see it be. So maybe you're feeling sad and frustrated because you want to see your friends, you want to tell them all these things, then write a story about what you're going to tell your friends and what that looks like. Or, again, get out a piece of paper, get some finger paints with mom and dad's permission and supervision, of course, and draw a picture for how you're feeling, even if it's happy or sad or angry or worried or joyful or any good or bad, or we don't want to say good or bad. So like sort of more happy-ish emotion or sad-ish emotion, whatever it is, you can express it on paper using artwork or maybe dancing too, or music like we talked about. And then with your body, just at least try that deep breathing. Try to get yourself feeling nice and calm and comfy. Maybe you wrap yourself in a nice blanket too, give it a little squeeze that affects this part of the body too, and do your nice deep breathing. And that can really help you feel relaxed and calm. So you can use these throughout your whole life, and they'll help you the whole time. And the more you do them, the more they'll help you. So practice makes perfect. And so, yeah, so I just wanted to share that with you today because I thought that was really interesting. And I like to just sit and stare at that picture a little bit because I just found it and it's really makes me happy. But I also like to look at Pigface a little bit too, because Pigface kind of makes me happy because I like to know that Pigface likes to play tug of war and play with balls and have water squirting in his face, and that makes him feel happy even though he's a turtle. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to squeeze my body a little bit and take some breaths. And thank you for being here with me today. So I'll stop there. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them. And otherwise, I'll see you next week. And thank you for joining me at the UH Connor Kids Corner. So be well.